Hello, members of the most illustrious fantasy football league, Eagle Point Butts. It is I, your commissioner and 1-2, 3-time undisputed champion, Chase E. Callahan, coming at you live from HQ. Here once again to impart my fantasy football knowledge, my blessing of fantasy football wisdom upon you, as now the only undefeated team left and the highest scoring team so far this year. What a week. A lot of close games. I mean, that one against Luke and Brennan was unbelievable. What a finish. And a lot of injuries this week. So, without any further ado, let's get right into this week's power rankings. League, I don't like to do this, but this is an emergency announcement, an emergency update. Heartbreaking stuff tonight. One of the members of our league, one of the owners of our league, was the victim of a hate crime tonight. And like I said, you never want to talk about stuff like this, but it's real stuff that some of us face every single day. And that victim of that hate crime tonight was your commissioner, the 3-time undisputed champion. As you know, I do volunteer at my local church, Encounter Church in Arnold, Missouri. And as I was walking to my car tonight after volunteering and serving the Lord, I found a note on my car. And as you can see, the note says some obscene things. It just says some obscene things. I don't want to repeat it, but I need to speak my truth through this, and so I will repeat it. Read it. It says, "Suck my dack, Tua for president." Obviously, somebody who hates me for, let's put aside the fact that 3-time undisputed champion, the only undefeated team left in the league, highest scoring team in the league. This is a hate crime against somebody because of the team they represent. All right. Can we just be clear about that? And this kind of hatred is just not tolerated in our league. I'm thankful it happened to me, somebody who's strong and can handle it. Not some of the other members of our league. Obviously, the Tua for president, a threat for how I played Tua this week, and he was injured. I'm going to have our friend of the league, Jonathan Elliott Swan, launch a full investigation into this note and the origins of this note. But it just brings, can we just get back to playing football? Members of our league shouldn't be going out to their cars every night, getting hate letters. It's just disappointing. I think at times like this, we need to remind ourselves that we play for something greater. And like I said, I'm just thankful it happened to me, somebody who's strong enough to take it and not proclaim it to the world that it happened. Because it did happen. I am the victim of a hate crime. And can we just get back to fantasy football? Can we just get back to uniting each other? Without any further ado, let's get into the power rankings. All right, and in the number 1 spot this week, no surprise, you've got myself, the boss, the only undefeated team left in the league and the highest scoring team after the first 2 weeks. But at what price? At what price am I willing to pay to still be the highest scoring team in the league, or the undefeated team? If I could have taken this loss to champ and not have lost Cooper Kupp and Isaiah Pacheco and Jordan Love, I would have made that trade 9 times out of 10, probably 10 times out of 10. It is very good to have gotten that win so that I'm 2-0 and going into probably a rough 4 to 6 week patch without those people. I don't know if Isaiah Pacheco is even going to come back this year. Hopefully Cooper Kupp does. But either way, get the win. My team should be good enough to still win me some games. This receiving core, Rashee Rice, CeeDee Lamb, and DK Metcalf should be solid still. Devon Achane, rumors that he's going to get even more work. His legs are going to freaking fall off. So positives. DK this week was a big positive. Really had the game that I needed him to have so that I don't feel bad about drafting him. Rashee Rice will get better over time, especially with Hollywood Brown being on the IR and now Pacheco being out and Travis Kelce being a non-factor. Rashee Rice will continue to get more and more production. And both of my tight ends, McBride and Bowers, both look like the premier tight ends in the league. They're actually getting production. They're actually getting targets and yards when almost every other tight end, at least that was drafted, is really underwhelmed and underperformed. Negatives, well, people's legs falling off for one. Isaiah Pacheco breaking his leg. That really sucks for me. It means I have to really try to maneuver and maybe test the trade market. Cooper Kupp, we'll see how severe his injury is. If I can get him back, I still feel very solid about my team. They're not putting him on the IR yet, so we'll see what happens. And then Jason Sanders has been a real disappointment to start the year, so we getting rid of him. Finally, I received an anonymous tip from the hotline that I'm purposely taking out quarterbacks after I'm 2 for 2 for people getting hurt in the quarterback position. I will ask John to launch a league investigation into this issue, and will report back as I can. But there are some negatives. Hopefully the waiver wire will help me in a good way. And we move on to face Ridley D's Nuts this week, who might end my undefeated streak, which would be very fitting. So we'll see what happens. But for now, like I said, for now I'm in the 1 spot. I think by next week it might be it. It may have just been 2 weeks of undefeated, but we'll see what happens. All right, kind of a surprise and a wild turn of events. I have the Hilton Head Whalers all the way up from the 7 spot last week to the number 2 spot this week. And how did he do that? Well, the first big point is his team hasn't been hit by the injury bug yet. And so some people say, hey, Zach won. Why isn't Zach in the 2 spot? And I actually agree. Why isn't Zach in the 2 spot? Well, we'll talk about that later. It's mostly due to injury. Tim putting up a big week, even with Tyreek being a non-factor in Buffalo, speaks to the strength of his team. It's the reason Tim got an A in his draft. Josh Jacobs looks great, as good as advertised. Nico Collins is the number 1 wide receiver in a very good Houston offense. And Malik Neighbors had a breakout game. I know I've kind of been tough a little bit on Malik Neighbors. Again, I didn't hate the draft pick whenever Tim made the choice. When he plays bad teams, he's going to look really good. I liked that draft pick a lot more than one we'll talk about later on. But Malik Neighbors, great breakout game. Hopefully he'll be able to actually put that kind of performance up against good teams. George Kittle also had a great game. And Brian Robinson Jr. continues to be consistent. So I don't see a reason why Tim's team can't score like 115 a week, especially considering Tyreek, again, only put up 3.6 points. And so positives, Tim has a really balanced team right now. Negatives, I just don't know what Tyreek's ceiling or what his production will look like with Skylar Thompson throwing him the football. If it's at all serviceable, Skylar Thompson is at all serviceable, Tyreek will eat and he'll be fine in that offense. But I think that's a big question mark for Tim. But it's a question mark whenever the rest of his team is healthy and performing. And as long as Tim doesn't catch the injury bug, I think he's in a really good spot to make a postseason push. So big year incoming for Tim. Again, hasn't been touched by the injury bug yet, so we'll see what happens. But number 2 this week is Tim. All right, and in the 3 spot. All right, and still in the 3 spot this week, we've got the Victoria's Secret champ, who had a great week. What a fantastic America's Game of the Week to get our fantasy season kicked off. Champ putting up 110 points, just happened to run into the undefeated commissioner and 3-time undisputed champion. So no fault of his own. A fantastic game. Again, I'm glad I won because I don't know if I'm going to win the next time we play each other, especially with these injuries and how good Champ's team is. So let's dive into that. So positives, starting out, James Conner is going to be a top 5 running back in this fantasy football season if he stays healthy. That's going to be an unbelievable value pick for Champ. He's just got to stay healthy because he's so deadly in this Arizona offense. It's fun to see. Kyren Williams, okay game. We'll talk a little bit more about him in just a little bit. But Champ made a very good move of having Zach Charbonnet handcuffed for Kenneth Walker because Kenneth Walker missed the week. Zach Charbonnet came in, had a pretty good game, especially for a flex spot. So great work there, Champ. Brandon Aubrey looks like he could be sleeper pick of the year, depending on what happens with one other kicker we'll talk about later on. But, I mean, he got like 17 points and then 19 points and then 15 points this week. I mean, that's unbelievable production out of a kicker. Negatives for Champ. Talking about Kyren Williams. I'm a little nervous for Kyren just because with Cooper out and Puka Nacua being out, he really needs a receiver to step up so that they don't have to load the box against him constantly. Amari Cooper being at the mercy of Mr. Happy Ending is a tough place to be. He's the best receiver in Cleveland, and they just can't get him the ball because Deshaun looks awful. I would love for the Cowboys to give the Browns a call and say, hey, bring Amari Cooper back down to Dallas. We could really use him. I hope Amari Cooper turns it around. There's nothing that I've seen that would tell me he is. And so I may not play. If I was Champ, I probably would bench him until I see something change for Cleveland. And then Kyle Pitts. Everybody's always talked about how talented Kyle Pitts is. If he's really that talented, he would have broken out by now. Again, 20 yards. Kyle Pitts experiment, kind of done with it, kind of over it. But Champ has had just a lot of production out of people that were deeper picks like James Conner, like Zach Charbonnet with Kenneth Walker being out. Champ's team is going to be just fine. Davante Adams, I will say this. So I didn't get to watch like the afternoon slated games. I watched most of the first games because I was on the road going to another concert and also lost another quarterback. So maybe there's some sort of conspiracy there with me going to concerts and then losing my quarterbacks to injuries. But when I left the house, Davante Adams had 22 yards, and I was feeling really good. I was like, oh, man, I'm in a really good spot right now. And then like 5-6 hours later, I checked my phone, and Davante Adams has 110 receiving yards and a touchdown. I'm like, what the heck happened? This isn't good. I might lose. But was able to pull it out. Champ's team looks really, really good this year. I think if you look at the rankings maybe next week or in 3 or 4 weeks, I think Champ's probably going to stay top 4 for quite some time as long as he doesn't actually have significant injuries again. He hasn't really been hit too hard by the injury bug. So as long as that happens, he's in for a really good season this year and well deserving of the 3 spot this week. All right, a bit of surprise. I've got USDA certified lead in ZP3, the undisputed 1-2-3 4-time champion and other half of the Billy IQ Fantasy Football Brain Trust at the 4 spot this week. Really just because of injuries. If it wasn't for injuries, I would not have dropped him to 4. But injuries have really hit the Billy IQ Fantasy Football Brain Trust really hard so far. And we're only in week 2. But Zach got punched in the mouth on Thursday night by James Cook. But this is what I'll say. Zach almost came back. And if it wasn't for the injuries, he has a real shot of winning this thing. You come down here. Joe Mixon left the game injured, which led to Cam Akers coming in and fumbling a goal line rush. Joe Mixon should have been in there, probably converts. That's 6 points. Debo exits the game with a few minutes left in the 4th with the 49ers down. You got to think he's going to start contributing there too. You start adding these things up a little bit, you're like, 10 points really could swing really quickly for Zach. So it's really like the point output for my team spoke to the strength of my team top to bottom with those injuries. It's the same thing for Zach. I mean, for Joe Mixon to only get 5 points and for him to still put up 93 points when he's got Dalton Kincaid and Jalen Waddle not producing, it talks about how strong his team really is. And so, positives for Zach. Bijan Robinson looks like the best running back in the league. Just from the eye test level, he looks like he's on a different plane, different tier of running back. They need to use him more. They only gave him like 12 or 14 touches, and he turned that into 97 yards and 25 receiving yards. They need to give him 20 touches a game. Like, that's crazy to me. Use him more, unless they're just trying to keep him fresh. So that was a really good sign. Debo shouldn't be out too long, maybe a week or two. Joe Mixon also shouldn't be out too long. So those are positives because Zach's going to need them to stay in the hunt this year. We scroll down here also, Rashid Shaheed. Zach has him stashed on his bench. What a start to the season for Rashid Shaheed. Another positive for Zach. Negatives for Zach, outside of the injuries, Dalton Kincaid has yet to put up a meaningful performance in Buffalo. I think as they play teams where they have to have a pass-heavy script, maybe the Jaguars, but I don't know if the Jaguars' offense is that good to keep up. They'll utilize him more when they play good teams. The problem is they've just been, like this Miami game, they blew him out, so there really wasn't a lot of need for Dalton Kincaid. Hopefully that turns around. And then Mike Evans only putting up 42 yards against Detroit. Mike Evans will be fine. Just stay healthy. He'll be fine. But Zach's team's going to be just fine once he gets Debo back as well. This is a team that's going to be competing deep into the season. Just hit a little speed bump with the injuries. So once that's in order, he's going to be just fine. And I got to mention again, the only kicker, because Brandon Aubrey's actually the second best kicker right now in fantasy, Ka'imi Fairbairn, 17 and 19 points. Unbelievable. If he doesn't slow down, he's going to be sleeper pick of the year. If he does slow down, it might be Brandon Aubrey. We might have a kicker be sleeper pick of the year. Unreal production. So Zach's in the 4 spot. He'll probably go back up as the season goes on. We'll just see what happens. All right, and then shooting all the way up from the 10 spot last week to the 5 spot this week, we've got Ridley D's Tyler having a monster week, highest scoring team this week, laying the wood on the gentleman, and just feeding off the bulletin board material I gave him last week. He heard everything that I was saying, everything that the league was saying, and felt like he needed to quiet the haters, and he did. I mean, that's a monster score this week. And we just come down here to look at some of these positives. Alvin Kamara, I feel like every year he has at least one game like this. I remember, 2 or 3 years ago in the playoffs? He had like 6 touchdowns in one game. Unbelievable. And he's in year 7. Year 7 running back, and he's doing stuff like this, unfortunately against my boys. But what a game for Alvin Kamara. More positives. Calvin Ridley really wants me to eat my words this year. We'll see what happens as the year goes on, because he had a really good game against the Jets. He looks good. And if he really has a great season, I will admit my mistakes. I am nothing if I'm not fair and balanced. Roasting Tyler for taking him so early. We'll see where we're at like week 7 or 8. But he's making me want to eat my words. And then Tyler with a fantastic pickup over here, J.K. Dobbins. Looks as good as he's ever looked for the Chargers. He's going to get even more touches. If he stays healthy, that's a massive pickup for Tyler. A team with tremendous upside. Some holes, some negatives. Jared Goff looks lost to start the season. He had a ton of attempts and only put up 8.78 points because of his 2 interceptions. Travis Kelce is MIA. I feel like he's probably super distracted because nobody can get away from him. He's releasing his own serials now. I think we're all ready for the Travis Kelce experiment to be done. I've never seen somebody so beloved in football become so disliked, and he didn't hit his wife or something like that. He's just, everybody's annoyed by him. That's probably not a good thing to say, but anyways, I digress. Tyler just had a really good performance out of almost everybody. You want to see Garrett Wilson's numbers come up, and they probably will as the season goes on and he gets more reps with Rodgers. I don't know if Jerry Jeudy's performance is going to go up though, because Cleveland sucks. Anyways, yeah, I think Tyler next week is playing me, and he's looking to stop my undefeated streak, and he probably will, which is kind of poetry for Tyler. I'm kind of speaking that into existence in hopes that it's reverse psychology for his team. But I think Tyler's well deserving of the 5 spot, and he could be a team to watch, especially because of the J.K. Dobbins pickup. As long as he stays healthy. Tyler, again, really hasn't been touched by the injury bug, and so that's really to his benefit right now. So 5 spot, we'll see where he's at next week. All right, and in the 6th spot, we've got the proud owner and operator of Brennan's Buttholes, Brennan the Biz himself. Happy birthday to Brennan. It's so great to celebrate your birthday with such a clutch performance, such a grit and heart performance this week, taking out Luke at the last second. And his team really needed that, because dropping to 0-2 to start the season is really tough. So, lo and behold, talking about positives for his team, Derrick Henry and Breece Hall scored more than 30 points combined. They're going to be doing that most weeks, and that'll help carry Brennan. What's really crucial is that Drake London and Chris Olave combined for more than 10 points. And if they can combine for 20 points a game, and Brennan gets 30 out of his running backs at least, Brennan's going to win a lot of games. He's going to be in a good spot. And so positives for Brennan, his running backs are consistent. If Drake London and Olave can keep getting targets, I think London's going to get better as the year goes on. That'll really help him. He also has Zay Flowers on his bench, so he's got depth at the wide receiver position. He just needs one of them to become a true number 1 wide receiver. Tony Pollard also sneaky consistent. Negatives for Brennan, some roster issues, just management issues. Tight end position, I don't even know if he played. The the Colts against Green Bay was probably not the best play. But Brennan will clean that up. Also, Anthony Richardson, like I said in week one, he had a great week one, but he's really dependent on the long ball. And so if that's not there, he's not a very efficient quarterback. So we kind of saw that this week. We'll see as things progress because I don't know. I'm just not super sold on him. But I think Brennan's running back core, and if his receiving core can be serviceable, like I said, he's going to win a lot of games. And so 6th spot is a good spot for him. We'll see if he shoots up the rankings because this coming week he's got a date with Destiny, a date with ZP3, the 4-time undisputed champion. That's a big game. So we'll see what happens, but I think Brennan comfortably in the 6th spot this week. All right, in the 7th spot this week, I've got Mucho Mando's Brandon. And it was really tough to leave Brandon in the 7th spot this week and not move him up, especially after taking out the 4-time undisputed champion ZP3 this past week. Great win for Brandon. It's just there's some question marks that we need to get answered with Brandon's team. I do really like his team. I think I've been pretty vocal about that. There's just some question marks specifically in the receiving core that we're going to get to. But positives for Brandon. What a game out of his top 3. Kyler Murray, Ramondre Stevenson, and James Cook, all 3. Unbelievable. James Cook and Kyler Murray combined for basically half his points. The problem is you can't rely on that every week because James Cook and Kyler Murray aren't going to basically score 30 points each week. They can do 10-15 for James Cook and maybe 15-20 for Kyler Murray, but if they would have scored that, Brandon would have lost. And so I'm just saying, in like consistency wise, amazing to see this kind of production. Ramondre Stevenson, I think, will be consistent, but these two, you're not going to be able to expect that every week. And then you come down to his receiving core, and this is where we hit the negatives. DJ Moore is very frustrated with Caleb Williams in Chicago, has not been useful. Jamar Chase is frustrated with everybody in the world, Bengals and the rest of the NFL. Brandon needs Jamar Chase to go back to Jamar Chase status and actually be a number 1 receiver in the league. Terry McLaurin, they're not using him correctly in Washington. They're doing dink and dunk because that's what Jaden Daniels is going to be comfortable with for a while. And Terry McLaurin is much better at stretching the field. It's not really his yards after catch isn't really his game. And so that's why he's in the 7th spot. And then obviously the tight end spot, not good for him. It's not good for most people. But that's why he's in the 7th spot because he does have really good top tier talent. But then when you hit the wide receivers, it's really lackluster. I think if one of these 3 can emerge as the number 1 receiver he needs, he's going to be in a really good spot and continue to rise up. And he's going to win games because he's got some really good pieces. He's just in the 7th spot because there are question marks. But a big win this week for Brandon and a really big game coming up against him and Tim to kind of have control of that division. It'll be interesting to see. But 7th spot for Brandon this week. We'll see what happens next week. All right, and in the 8th spot this week, we have Leather Daddy. I want the league to know this. We were 2 minutes, 120 seconds away from Leather Daddy Luke being 2-0 and number 2 in the power rankings. Even with an 87-point week, we were 120 seconds away from that. Heartbreaking loss for Luke. Not all bad news, though, as Saquon still looked really good. I know he didn't get to the end zone, but he was denied on like the 1-yard line. So many things did not go Luke's way that caused him to lose. Saquon getting denied on the 1-yard line of a touchdown, and then also dropping that pass to ice the game, basically. It sucks. But Chris Godwin also, what a positive. He looks like a top 5, top 10 receiver this year if he can stay healthy. Again, health is always the question. Devontae Smith without A.J. Brown also had a great game. Unfortunately, there are quite a few negatives. DeAndre Swift, yet to score over 5 points in Chicago. You got to hope he'll score more. Houston isn't like a lights out defense, and that offense should get better for Chicago. I really am worried about Caleb Williams. Stephon Diggs looks touchdown dependent, like I mentioned last week after he had a good week due to the touchdowns. No production out of the tight end spot, and Michael Pittman looks rough because of Anthony Richardson's inefficiencies within like passes of 30 yards. So there's some issues around Luke's team, but he's got some good pieces. He's going to be looking to bounce back against Champ this week, which is a tough matchup. But Luke's going to win some games. Give it some time. We'll see where he lands. For now, I have him in the 8th spot, but it is crazy to think we were less than 120 seconds away from Luke being undefeated and in the number 2 spot of the power rankings. we'll see what happens next week. All right, and in the 9 spot this week, unfortunately, the lowest scoring team this week, we've got Bert's Butts. And it's not really Bert's fault. The Bills blowing out the Dolphins meant that Josh Allen really didn't have to do anything. Bert's expecting like 20 to 25 points every week out of Josh Allen. And so to get 9.7, that really hurts. Other negatives for Bert, we'll hit the negatives first. Brandon Ayuk does not look like he's football ready. I know that was a steal of the pick because Bert got him in like the 6th round, but he just doesn't look football ready. Tank Dell, again, he is like the 3rd or 4th mouth to eat in a Houston's Texans offense with a lot of mouths to feed. I'm just not sure what his upside is going to look like this year. Keon Coleman, goose egg. Taysom Hill, non-factor. A lot of holes on Bert's team, unfortunately. But there are positives. Starting with Marvin Harrison Jr.
Play, but look at the rookie here. Here he goes, and everybody leaves him, and nobody.
All right, Marvin Harrison Jr. had a heck of a week too. Let's take a look at where he is at for receiving yards specifically. We're looking at number 24. Look at that. What a jump up from last week. Let's head on over to targets, see if we can find him. Look at that, number 42. We don't even have to hit show more for targets. Good for Marvin Harrison Jr. Now let's look at receptions. I'm not seeing him on receptions. Let's hit show more. Let's control F this guy. He's not showing up there. Show more. What about now? There he is. Number 88 for receptions, so that's not ideal. But you know what? Monster week 2. He's climbing up in the ranks. Excited to see what happens after this week and where he ends up after such a positive week for Brett. Back to you at HQ. All right, other positives for Bert. Obviously, Josh Allen is going to get back on track when he's in better games where he actually has to compete. Jordan Mason has looked studly with CMC hurt. David Montgomery's been very consistent. And kind of a sneaky positive for Brett is Jackson Smith-Njigba has had a great week. This last week was targeted a lot. So somebody to watch for Brett to see if he continues to get a large amount of the target share out of Seattle. But we will see what happens next week as Bert is taking on Mike, who's trying not to go 0-3, and Bert's trying not to go 1-2. Big matchup. Should be fun to watch. All right, and then finally we have the gentleman Mike in the 10 spot, who really didn't have that bad of a week this week. He's just in the 10 spot because he's 0-2 now. And there were some positives. Like I said, he almost scored 100 points. Not an awful week. We come down here. Justin Jefferson is not that banged up. He shouldn't miss any time. And he looked great against San Francisco. So that's a positive for Mike. Darnell Mooney, shout out to Mike. I know I roasted him last week about Darnell Mooney. And then Darnell Mooney also read the bulletin board material and had a great week against Philly. Will be interesting to see what happens moving forward with Darnell Mooney. Maybe Mike has a big brain move that gets him back into the hunt here. Negatives for Mike, Aaron Jones and Jerome Ford. Not great weeks for them. A.J. Brown being injured and just finding out like before the game Monday, not great because he had to play Jahan Dotson, which is not ideal for Mike. And Mike's going to win some games. He's got a good lineup. He's got a good team. You know, it's just tough start to the year for Mike. And like I mentioned with Brett, he's facing Bert this week, and hopefully he can win this one and go 1-2 instead of 0-3, because it's going to be really tough to climb out of an 0-3 hole in this league. And stranger things have happened, but that would be really tough for Mike. So big week incoming for Mike and Brett. And let's head on over to check out America's Game of the Week.
USDA certified lean on the...
All right, and then we've got the USDA Certified Lean America's Game of the Week. Like I said, last week's was such a fun one. I'm excited to watch this matchup, a divisional matchup between Tim and Brandon as they jockey for position in that left cheek. Should be a good one. Two teams that are great. We'll see if Tim can continue his dominance and see if Brandon can pull out a little bit of a stunner. But really excited for this week. What a great week. Good luck, everybody. The waiver wire has been hot and it's been hopping, so thank you for your participation. Make sure you get your pick'ems in for this week as well, and I will see you back here next week for the power rankings once again. Goodbye.